Hello, fellow nerds, Kalko here. And while you wait for the Hetalia Character Awards, consider this an appetizer before the main event. So, recently an art book was published with all the canon heights, and oh boy, do I have a lot to say about it. Everyone in the fandom mostly agreed to ignore it and laugh at it, so I'm going to do it as well. But that isn't going to stop me from ranting about it. Because all of these heights are, once again, nonsense! The tallest person on this list is 185 centimeters, or 6 feet tall. Yeah, apparently in Hima's world, anyone being taller than 185 centimeters is just baffling. There are also changes in previous characters' heights, and let me tell you, you are going to want to see it. So, Hima based most of the heights off of their real-world counterparts. Okay, some of the heights. Okay, there's a lot of them that are shorter or taller for no reason. So with that, let's take a look at this ridiculous height list, starting from shortest to tallest. Before we get into the craziest, let's at least start off with something sane. Sealand is still the shortest at 130 centimeters. Moldova is slightly taller than him at 135 centimeters, which makes sense because child. Then we have ancient Egypt, who is 150 centimeters, which you would think would make sense because people didn't get a lot of nutrition in ancient times. But actually, people were surprisingly tall over there for the times. Ancient Egyptian women, whether royal or commoner, ranged from between 155.6 centimeters, which is 5 feet and 1 inch, in the late period, to 159.5 centimeters, or 5 feet and 2 inches, in the early dynastic period, according to the American Journal of Physical Anthropology. They were doing a study where they were looking at mummies. But there are also sources I found that said the average was 153 centimeters, and I'm not going to complain of that small of a difference. But the bottom line is, ancient Egypt is short, even for her time. So we have our first, you should be way taller than you actually are. And then we have Liechtenstein, who is 154, or about 5 feet, which makes sense since she's a small teenage country who is still dependent on her brother. Now, here is our first major change, and one of the few good things that happened on this list. Notice how we passed a certain individual who had a frustratingly tiny height. Well, I am proud to say that Hima Papa has answered our prayers, because next on our list, standing at 155 centimeters, is Latvia. He grew 15 centimeters! The boy grew! I guess being away from Russia finally made Latvia go through puberty. He's still small. I mean, he's still criminally below the average male height of Latvia. But it's nice to know that this isn't even his final form. This also proves that Latvia is still going through nation puberty, and he can grow into a healthy young adult. You may want to cling to that moment of victory, but brace for disappointment. Because at the same height as Latvia is Seychelles. Well, what's wrong with that, you may ask? Well, the average height of women in Seychelles is much taller, at about 5 feet 5 inches, or about 164 to 165 centimeters. And apparently women under 162 centimeters, or 5'3", are considered to be short. So again, way shorter than you should be. Next is ancient Greece, who is 157 centimeters, which seems to check out and is actually taller than average that the scientists who analyze bones from ancient Greece have given us. Wow, that's a first. Someone who is actually taller than average. Next on the list is Vietnam, a country with some of the world's shortest people. The average height for women in Vietnam is 152 to 156.2 centimeters. Makes sense, all my Vietnamese friends are so tiny. So, how tall is Vietnam? Prepare to be surprised. Vietnam is 158 centimeters. Hema actually gave her a few extra centimeters to step on us with. But it's only 2 centimeters, so I'm not going to gripe about it. But I actually kind of like this, since the reason Vietnam is female is due to her history of strong, powerful women, so I think this height suits her. Speaking of which, her neighbor, Taiwan, is slightly taller at 160 centimeters. But last we saw, her height was, what? 150 centimeters? Taiwan grew 10 centimeters? It makes sense with the average height of Taiwan, but that means Taiwan hit a growth spurt. Does this mean she used to be a teenager and is now an adult? Oh man. Oh goodness, the Hetalia fandom is not going to like hearing that. FBI, open up! At the same height, we have 2 more people. Belarus, who is 5 centimeters shorter than she should be, and Egypt? What? I'm sorry, but the average height in Egypt for men is 10 centimeters taller than that. What? How did Egypt get so small? Unless Hema confused the average female height, which is just slightly shorter than this. Yeah, Hema must have gotten it mixed up. Unless... Wait. Is Egypt trans? I'm going to be the first to make this headcanon because, given Egypt's history, it doesn't seem too far-fetched. And Hema is no stranger to LGBT characters. But that's a discussion, and possibly a video, for another day. I need to get through the rest of these heights. Singapore is 161 centimeters, which is also criminally small for the average. But then you remember that Singapore is small and also fairly young. So I think he's still growing. It still makes me annoyed, but okay. Czechia and Hungary are the same height at 162 centimeters. Both of their averages are slightly taller at 164, but a measly 2 centimeters isn't that bad. But I think it fits that these two are the same height, both in and out of Hetalia. But what is annoying is this. Monaco is apparently a full-grown adult, and even the average in France is shorter than the average in Czechia and Hungary. But yet Monaco is 163 centimeters. Monaco is a microstate, so you would expect her to be smaller, but I guess not. Maybe she's taller than Liechtenstein because she's an adult, but wasn't Monaco supposedly described as incredibly small? Wasn't she supposed to be a bit smaller than Liechtenstein? What happened to that? Now she's taller than Czechia, Singapore, and Hungary. Unless she grew too. Or maybe her height was simply retconned. Also at 163 centimeters is Belgium, which is slightly shorter than average. 1 centimeter taller than that is Nico, which is much shorter than the average Japanese man, which is 172 centimeters. But I don't know if this was when he was still a micronation, or if this is him as an adult human now. So Nico gets an excuse. But do you know who doesn't get an excuse? Japan, who is the same height. 5 feet 5 inches for you Americans. Yep, Japan is still tiny. Also at that height is Genoa, who compared to the modern day Italian man is more than 10 centimeters shorter. But since this is probably historical height, it was probably drastically different. Now, I understand you guys are all very frustrated right now, but I just want you all to take a second. Just look at Iceland. Just look at this boy. Now, how tall do you think he is? Go on. Just guess. How tall is Emo Ice Boy? Iceland, along with India, Ukraine, and the Philippines, is 166 centimeters, or 5 feet and 5 inches. India, Ukraine, and the Philippines seem to be accurate with real-life height, but Iceland is criminally short for his average. The average height amongst men in Iceland is 181 centimeters. I get that Iceland is still a teenager, but come on! 166 centimeters? That's smaller than me! Next is China and Malaysia at 169 centimeters, who seem to be accurate, but are still disappointing. Or at least China is. Hema shrunk Japan for some reason, and yet he left China as normal. I always picture China to be much shorter because he's an old man. So you'd expect some shrinkage or some back problems, maybe a bit of scoliosis. When you imagine him like this, it just doesn't feel right. At 170 centimeters, we have Indonesia, Persia, Rome, Hong Kong, and Poland. Okay, so Poland is taller than I predicted in the last video, but come on, with Lithuania being drawn shorter than the United States for the entire series, that's what everyone expected. At least Hema remained consistent on him being 10 centimeters shorter than Lithuania, though. However, he was not consistent with the average height of Poland, which is about 10 centimeters taller than Poland's height. What? Well, considering how Poland is the shortest adult European man on here, I guess it kind of makes sense given his history. Maybe that explains all the invasions. He's just so small compared to everyone else. Indonesia, who is well known for having some of the shortest people on the planet, is also this height, which is taller than the average. Rome is also taller than he should be. According to this study, most Romans, or at least the gladiators, were on average Iceland's height. Hong Kong also falls slightly short, and I can't seem to find a good source for Persia, so you live today. At 171 centimeters is Thailand and New Zealand. Thailand is average for his country. But New Zealand? Oh boy. New Zealand is at least 6 centimeters shorter than he should be. Now we get to Calco height. A lot of disappointing characters are in this height group. First is Italy Romano, which makes sense that he's smaller than his brother since Northern Italians are taller than Southerners. And I liked how Hema honored that. But he's still shorter than he should be. But not by too much at least. But do you know who else is 172 centimeters? Switzerland. And do you know who else? Finland. And do you know who else? Romania. Why are you so small? Looking at the average heights in all of these countries, they are all incredibly small compared to their averages. Especially Switzerland and Finland. It's just... I'm as tall as Switzerland. Well, at least Finland grew 2 centimeters with me. So he went from 170 to 172, just like I did. The only accurate one in this tier is Cyprus. At 173 centimeters is Italy Venetiano, so he's only 1 centimeter taller. So Romano doesn't have too much to feel bad about. But Veneziano should, since he's still much shorter than he should be. Do you know who else is shorter than he should be? Not Cameroon and Cuba. They are both at average height for their countries, like good boys. Now we have some hope for you all to calm down. Portugal and Bulgaria are both 174 centimeters. Both average heights. Is that better? Okay, back to the enraging stuff. At 175 centimeters, we have France and England. I think it's neat that they are both the same height. I just wish that they were drawn that way. Even though the average in both is 178, it's not the difference that bothers me. It's the lack of consistency. They got it right in the first art style, but in the later art styles, England shrunk. Unless France wears heels. Actually, that would explain a lot. Maybe that's why he's taller. Also at this height is Korea and Macau. Though I couldn't find an average Macau height, I would expect him to be around Hong Kong's height. How is Macau, a territory that has never really been independent and still in his teens, taller than Portugal, Switzerland, and Finland? Just nation logic gone. Theories destroyed. Macau, you have broken me. Not even a real nation, and taller than more than half of the people on this list. I can't. But we do have one ray of hope. Korea is actually his average height, and he is consistent throughout the manga. Anyways, Spain has an accurate height of 176 centimeters or 5 feet and 9 inches. At 177 centimeters, we have America, Austria, Turkey, and Luxembourg, all at the accurate height. Now, I know what you may be thinking. What is a tiny country like Luxembourg doing here? And to that I say, look at this image. Luxembourg is small, but not like Liechtenstein or Singapore. It is not a microstate. It has been a kingdom for many, many years. He is a grown adult with an independent, thriving economy. Thus, he is at full height. Now for something to make you happy. Next, we have a bunch of nations at 178 centimeters, also known as all the nations that are just slightly taller than America. Looks like all those years of being younger and smaller and talked over finally paid off because America's twin brother, Canada, is 1 centimeter taller, which is accurate. So in this tier we also have Prussia, who is shorter than his brother due to poor nutrition, and this has been kept consistent throughout the series. Germania is also this height, as well as Slovakia, Norway, and Australia. But Slovakia and Norway should be at least 180 or 181, so they are a little short. As we reach the top of this nation height ladder, at 179 centimeters we have Estonia, who is normally portrayed as taller than Lithuania, but I guess that's been retconned too. It's still shorter than average, especially since Estonia has some of the tallest people in the world. Coming in at 1/2 of a centimeter taller is Greece, who is not portrayed as taller than Turkey in a lot of situations. At last, my fellow Italians, we have reached the top of this proverbial nation height ladder. 180 centimeters and above. There are only 6 nations in this tier. At 180 centimeters, or a bit taller than 5'10", we have 2 countries. The first is Germany, and Germany has always been this height. It checks out as average. Everything is good. The other country is Lithuania. Yes! Hema has finally answered our prayers! Basketball land is finally a normal height! But then there's an issue, and it's the same thing as Estonia. He's portrayed as so much shorter than he actually is. He's drawn shorter than America and Estonia all the time. And he's actually a similar height to Russia. Actually, he's only 2 centimeters shorter than Russia. So this should actually be this. Get off your high horse, Russia. 2 out of 3 of your Baltics can challenge you easily to basketball. Denmark and Sweden are supposedly the same height at 181 centimeters, even though Sweden is always drawn taller. Maybe it's the hair. Speaking of Sweden, he seems to have shrunk by 1 centimeter. That's right, Sweden shrunk. And now, what in my opinion is one of the biggest disappointments, Russia. The largest nation in the world. How tall do you think Russia is? He has to be over 6 feet, right? Like maybe 190 centimeters? I, and apparently the rest of the Russian fandom, like to imagine him as Peter the Great height, around 2 meters, or 6 foot 8 inches. That way he's this big, intimidating nation that strikes fear into the hearts of other nations because he's so tall and intimidating, right? Well, prepare to be disappointed. Russia still remains at 182 centimeters, or 5 feet and 11 inches. Which, by the way, is much taller than the Russian average, which is 176 centimeters. As the biggest nation in the world, it's understandable that Hema would stretch him, but to 182 centimeters? If you're going to stretch Russia, go big or go home. Literally in this case. When you're almost as tall as the personification of Russia, he just isn't as cool. But let's go back to that headcanon about Russia being Peter the Great's height. What if Russia was 200 centimeters like we ever so want it? Well, let me put that in perspective for you. Take a look at this photo. You see that guy next to me? That man next to me is about 2 meters tall. And that is what Russia would look like if you stretched him and put him next to Romania. And last but not least, the tallest Hetalia character. The tallest person on this list, taller than Russia, stands at a whopping 185 centimeters, or 6 feet tall. The Netherlands. Now, I saw a lot of people complaining about Russia not being the tallest on this list. But you have to understand that the Netherlands is well known for having the tallest people in the world for decades. And it makes sense for the Netherlands to be taller. Seriously, I was just over there. I can confirm that the Dutch are incredibly tall. Thus, the Netherlands deserves this status as the tallest. I will provide you with a visual. This is me. Remember, I am a Switzerland. And this is my tall Dutch boyfriend. Granted, he is tall even for his own country. But the thing is, if you're going to mess around with heights, you might as well have fun with it. Go big or go home, or go small or go home. It's a cartoon. Exaggerate some things. Both Russia and the Netherlands are intimidating characters in this series. If they were freakishly tall, it would add to that or give it so much more meaning. Italia's Netherlands being this height means that no nation is taller than 6 feet. Think about it. These are nations. They're personifications of land. I just feel like there was this really big missed opportunity here. And that's why the entire fandom is just yeeting this chart right out the window. In conclusion, keep 2 things in mind. The entire series is full of continuity errors when it comes to height, and I'm going to do what everyone else is doing and pretend that everyone is taller than they actually are. And that was 1 mark higher on your history test. Thank you for watching. I am taller than more than half of the countries on this list, and my boyfriend still considers me short. Meanwhile, America be like, I like feet.